Welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's new webinar series discussing the Trump administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. We started this weekly series back in February, so if this is your first time, welcome. If you joined us before, welcome back. My name is Regina, and I'll be your host. Before we dive in, let's get a couple of housekeeping items out of the way. A friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review. We are recording today's event, and you'll receive the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized. Feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resources section contains a lot of great related resources, including the slide deck. There are several ways to engage with presenters and attendees. First, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Ask a Question box. We will save time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. You may also submit troubleshooting questions there. Second, you can join our you can join our attendee chat. Click the icon at the bottom of your screen with two chat bubbles. The attendee chat will appear. We encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking on the emoji icon and reacting. Last, we have heard your feedback, and we've extended today's webinar to 45 minutes to have more time for Q&A. Since this session is less than an hour and intended to be interactive and responsive, it is not eligible for CPE credit. Let's meet today's presenters. We're joined by several members of the Avalara team: Craig Reed, General Manager of Cross Border, and Patrick Frith, Senior Director of Growth for Cross Border. That's all I have for housekeeping, so I'm going to hand it over to Craig to get us started.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back for any of you who have been on our past webinars. I don't know, Patrick, if we're on number 13 or 14, somewhere around there, but but we've been doing this for a while. So, I always enjoy doing this every week because there's always something to talk about. Just this week, I guess we've had the latest news was that there's going to be tariffs on movies. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do that, but that's part of the news. And then, we'll talk about some of the other developments, but, the other two that sort of jump to mind for me are an announcement that there's going to be some tariffs coming on pharma, which I think crossed the headlines just, was it today or maybe last night even. And then auto tariffs, the changes with auto parts and the stackable tariffs with aluminum and steel that we'll get into. So we're going to talk a bit more about like we said, the latest news, implications to your business. We're going to talk about, things that we can do to help, and then some Q&A. Just to note, we usually have someone dedicated doing Q&A for our sessions. Just due to travel schedules, we were not able to do that today. So we will, Patrick and I will attempt to get to your questions at the end. However, if we do not, we will follow up with you after the webinar and make sure we get your questions answered and get you in contact with anyone you may need to talk to. All right, let's get started. First thing is a poll question. We like to start with a poll question, bit of an icebreaker. How many de minimis shipments came into the U.S. in 2024? Actually, is that dollars or number of shipments? Did we get the sign wrong?
Yeah, it's the number of, not the dollar amount. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a bit of a typo. Just make sure everyone's paying attention. So let's see what everyone thinks about this. Obviously, de minimis has been big news, right? Because was it Temu that decided they're going to stop shipping entirely, right? Likely due to the de minimis. And lots of changes happening with de minimis.
That's right.
Let's see what everybody said. We can see a bit of spread here. What's the correct answer?
1.4 billion was the correct answer. Yeah. So
shipments, dollars. So maybe some people thought the 2.1 was dollars and not shipments, but we'll correct that. But it's 1.4 billion shipments in 2024 came in under de minimis. So that, you can imagine, a great many of those were from China, so a pretty big impact, obviously, in lowering the de minimis. All right, let's get into the news. Patrick, you want to take it away?
Sure. So just a quick one. How did we get here? Well, we heard a lot of rhetoric at the beginning of the year, well, towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, about the flow of three items into the US: fentanyl, counterfeit goods, and illegal immigrants. And that really set the stage for the actions that we saw from February onwards. The administration decided to take action on those three things, and it resulted in the timeline that you see here. So beginning of February is when it all really kicked off, targeting Canada, China, and Mexico. That's when we heard the first about tariff increases, and those were the three countries in the crosshair. Towards the middle of February, around about the 18th of February, we started hearing rumbles of reciprocal taxes. So the US would impose a reciprocal tax on against countries which it felt were trading unfairly with the US. That's when we first heard that. Fast forward to the beginning of March, the hammer came down, and we saw 25% slapped on Canada and Mexico, and China got the 20%. Remember, that was a 10 plus 10, 20%. Moving through March, we saw responses. We saw responses specifically from Canada, who started raising tariffs themselves in direct response. And we heard noise from the European Commission that they would take firm action. And of course, China saying the same thing. Towards the end of March, the US then announced the 25% on cars and car parts that weren't made in the US. And that sent shockwaves, obviously, through certain sectors and industries within the US. Then we move into April. April the 2nd, can you believe that was over a month ago, the Rose Garden event. And we saw for the first time the reciprocal charges, the baseline of 10% on all imports starting from the 5th of April. And then the worst offenders, I suppose you could classify them as, had different tariffs applied to their goods being imported into the US. And then April, we saw the implementation and then the suspension, the pausing for 90 days of those reciprocal tariffs. And then May the 2nd, which was just a few days ago, at the end of last week, we saw big action, significant action on the de minimis exemptions from China and Hong Kong into the US. So that long-standing, over 100 years, that de minimis threshold, which had been in place, hasn't always been 800, but up till today was 800, had been eliminated for China and Hong Kong, which is certainly going to make a dent on that 1.4 billion shipments we saw last year in 2025. And then the most recent announcement towards the end of last week was the USMCA compliant auto parts are exempt, which is good news, I suppose, for specific industries in the US. And that took effect from the 3rd of May. And then, so a quick slide. We've decoded the board that was presented in the Rose Garden in a more simplified way. You can see a number of the worst offenders on the left-hand side there. The tariff, which the US believed that were imposed by those countries on US goods, and then subsequently in the yellow column, the discounted reciprocal tariffs which the US imposed, which was exactly half what the US felt it was being punished with. And then on the right-hand side there, a summary of everything. You know, the notable point here, Craig, is the pause, the 90-day pause. We've seen, I suppose now we're 30 days into that 90-day pause, so we have 60 to run. We're a third of the way through. Already we're hearing noises of trade deals. We're hearing noises of countries engaging with the US administration and trying to work things out. We still have 60 days for that to play out until the pause is lifted sometime in July. And then, we'll have to wait and see over the next 60 how that unfolds.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, for those of you who have been on may know this, but for those of you who haven't, I'm in Toronto, Canada. I'm Canadian. So I live the tariffs professionally and personally. But our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is actually in the White House today, apparently trying to make a trade deal between Canada and the US. Frankly, I'd expected to hear a lot more news over the last 30 days about trade deals. There's obviously been news too about, Trump has said that he has been talking to Xi in China, and they have been having conversations. China has turned around and denied that. So no one really knows what's happening behind the scenes, but we do know that Canada is at least attempting to strike a deal. Who knows if that'll come out in the news later today, or if it'll stretch on for a bit, but that's what's happening. So I'd expect we'll hear more, as you said, Patrick, over the next 60 days. So just to kind of summarize where we are now, and in case it is confusing, everyone's confused, but China right now is at 145% punitive tariff. So that means on top of the existing tariffs that may apply to a good, you're adding 145%. And of course, the duty-free de minimis has stopped for China and Hong Kong. For Chinese origin goods, that's important. We're going to get into that. So remember that, it's for Chinese origin goods. They have reciprocated. So there's tariffs on energy, there's tariffs on agricultural products, and then they've added the 125% tariff that everyone's familiar with as sort of the punitive tariff. For Canada and Mexico are basically in the same boat. So all USMCA compliant goods are at zero. That's about 40% for Canada and 50% of goods for Mexico. Non-compliant goods are at 25%. That's been in place since March. And then on the Canadian side, energy and potash are at 10%. Canada and Mexico have chosen different tax. As Patrick mentioned, Canada chose to retaliate on about 60 billion worth of goods at 25%. Mexico is not. And although they've taken different tax, they're both in the same boat. So it's not really clear what the right strategy is. But the rest of the world, because of the pause, is at 10%. So everyone else is sitting at 10%, unless it's steel and aluminum, which is at 25%, 25% on automobiles now. So that started April 3rd, and 25% on countries that buy oil or gas from Venezuela. So that's where we stand today. Let's continue on here. So, do you want to?
Yeah,
this is a pretty striking graph, isn't it?
It is. Somebody asked me, in living history, what was when have we experienced something as substantial and globally shocking as what we're going through right now? And somebody sort of piped up, oh, Brexit. Brexit was destabilizing. That's true, it was. But remember, in Brexit, we had 3 years to prepare for the changes. It was very transparent. There was lots of negotiations backwards and forwards. That is not a blip on the radar compared to what we're going through now. And it is, if you look back over the last 100 years, where we are right now is a lot more significant. And in fact, you have to go all the way back to 1930 to see where there was a massive, substantial shock. I don't know the details of the 1930s, but presumably they had more than days or hours to react to changes, which is what we have been experiencing in this tariff change.
And that's really been the story, hasn't it, Patrick? It's been the story that the tariffs come, very quickly. The changes, and sometimes peeled back very quickly, and that's certainly I would guess the groundswell of discussions that I've had, and I know you've had with manufacturers and importers and carriers and everyone involved in the supply chain has really been reacting to the dynamic changes, like how fast it's happening. And I think this graph, it's at 14.5%, right? But I don't think that includes, I know it doesn't include all the proposed reciprocal tariffs that were originally part of the Rose Garden ceremony, correct?
Right.
The Liberation Day tariffs.
Correct. It's going to be a lot higher than that.
Yeah, and then we talked about the end of the de minimis exemptions. This is a really big deal because the companies like Temu, Shein, and a lot of others, primarily Chinese companies were shipping goods under the de minimis. These are regular household goods and toys and housewares and things like that, not subject to duty and tax because they were under $800. They now face duties and taxes. And I believe it was Hong Kong Post that they're no longer shipping. They had stopped shipping, right? DHL had done the same for higher value. So there's been a lot of cavitation in the supply chain as a result of these changes.
That's right. We'll touch on to implications to your business. So we call this the four horsemen. So this is, if global trade was a jigsaw puzzle, it's made up of these four pieces. The de minimis exemptions, which it's the same everywhere in the world. There's de minimis in place around the world. They're all at different levels. The US obviously is very, very topical at the moment, down to zero for China, Hong Kong origin, $800 for everything else. So that's piece one. Piece two is your HS code. Without your HS code, Craig calls it the Rosetta Stone. Without that, you can't determine anything. You can't determine the duties and the taxes that must be paid, which is critical. You can't describe your product compliantly without a HS code. And in fact, for informal and formal clearances coming into the US, which of course, remember now, anything from China and Hong Kong you need, as part of your submission, as part of your declaration, you need the HS code. So the importance of your HS code is critical, especially when navigating the minefield. Declared value, very, very important. It's the commercial value of the good that you're bringing into that country. Yeah. You can't undervalue it. It's very important not to undervalue it.
Patrick, there's actually a question about that in the Q&A that I just noticed. It's very topical. So declared value, there's been a ton of discussion on LinkedIn and other places that I've seen where folks are talking about changing the declared value. And this is a major no-no. I mean, you cannot do this. If you get caught doing this, you are going to have serious problems with your future imports. CBP does not look favorably on misdeclaring value. And one of the questions was, we have a competitor who's doing this. What should we do? Well, I mean, that's really, really up to you. But know that the enforcement level is going up. And, that's one of the things they're going to be looking for. You look at the four horsemen here. Is the country of origin right? Do you have your HS code right? And is your declared value right? Those are going to be the things they're looking for. So I'm not sure if you should tell CBP or not, but I'd say that they're putting themselves at great risk doing things like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And country of origin has come up quite a few times, the fourth piece of the jigsaw. This is not, remember, this is not where the product shipped from on its last stop into the US. That is not the country of origin. The country of origin is where the product was substantially harvested, smelted, manufactured, assembled, whatever made the product that it is when it arrives into the country is the country of origin. So the polo shirt that I'm wearing, made in China, went to Mexico, had a logo stitched on it, had a couple of buttons added to it. It's still a polo shirt, and it arrives into this country as a polo shirt. So therefore, despite some activity in another country, in a third country on its way through, the country of origin is still China, and that's what must be declared. It's just as important, Craig, as the declared value, getting that right. The country of origin is something else which you have to be compliant with.
We're getting a lot of questions here on this, so I think we should pause here for a second because there's some questions about what is an HS code. So tariff codes are often called HS codes, a bit of a misnomer, but it's an industry term. What that means is that it's a numeric description of the goods. So every country has its own version of the tariff codes, and they're usually 10 digits long. It's called the HTS system in the US. It's called TARIC in the EU, for example. And this is what describes the goods. So having that correct is very, very important. And there's another question about, do I need the correct tariff code or HS code and country of origin? Answer is yes, because the combination, if you think of it like a table, the combination of the tariff code and the country of origin is what determines the duty rates, restrictions that might apply, all of the rules that apply. So, again, the tariff codes would be like the rows, and the countries of origin would be like the columns. And, the intersection of that, the cell, is what the duty rate's going to be, or what the rules for restrictions, et cetera, are going to be. So, yes, those things are very important. And actually, there's another question here that's related to this slide too. For a shipment from Europe to the US under $800 in value, does the 10% apply? The answer is maybe, because it depends on where the good was made. So back to country of origin, if it's made in China, well then yes, because it's Chinese origin goods, so de minimis is gone. If it's made in the UK, for example, or if it's made in Germany, then no, because the $800 de minimis is in effect for those goods. So again, important to know where your goods are made.
Absolutely. What are we seeing businesses and entities do? How are they reacting to tariff turmoil? Well, we know that beginning of last week, the three CEOs of the US's biggest retailers, Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, privately met with Trump and his administration regarding the tariffs. And I believe Walmart even said, this could put us out of business, given the origin of so much of our products and the pricing strategies we have in our stores around the country. The tariffs are seriously going to affect that, our pricing strategy, and of course, ultimately the customer base is going to feel it. So we're already seeing internal lobbying within the US around this. It's not just other countries making a noise, complaining. It's internal organizations. 33% decrease year over year on the number of freight vessels scheduled to arrive in the port of Los Angeles. Huge port, obviously. It's here on the West Coast, which is where I am. And all that Asia-US trade comes through here on the West Coast. That's down 33%. 12 states who've got their own interests, remember, and each state's different. It focuses on different industries and different imports and exports. They're already set to sue over the tariffs because they believe that they're going to suffer because of them. And then finally, 64% decrease of bookings on shipping containers from China through to April. So that was the end of last month. So that is the knock-on effect is huge, because if those shipping containers don't arrive here, we were speaking to somebody from a huge shipping organization in Europe, and the knock-on effect, if the containers don't come here because they never leave China because there's nothing to move, then those US exports, which rely on those containers to then subsequently move things on through the global supply chain, they're not here. So you've got all of a sudden you've got a container shortage as an indirect impact of tariffs.
Yeah, and there's also an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal recently. Ryan Peterson, the CEO of Flexport, was talking about how this could be an extinction level event for small businesses in the US. So, hopefully he's not right, but, your point is absolutely valid that, there's a lot of disruption within the supply chain. So, and good segue. So DHL suspended, then reinstated high value US deliveries. Anything over 800 on April 21st, they stopped, but then they withdrew the suspension, presumably because they could start collecting the correct amounts for it. I think it was just a bit of an administrative nightmare is what I interpreted, but all the carriers are responding differently, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. And then you can see the inspection enforcement. So I guess this is what had DHL worried. They reversed that decision, but they saw this coming. They saw the March, just as you're seeing it now. We saw the March numbers in terms of the number of inspections and the amount of duties and taxes to be collected. That's a lot of interceptions. It's a lot of shipments on hold. You need a big on hold cage to hold these shipments while the inspection process takes place. And then you have to have a very good mechanism of collecting and then paying the duties to the CBP. So
yeah. And actually, we have a colleague who has a friend who is buying shoes from Sweden, I believe it was, and he was required to sign a CBP 5601 form, which is basically I shall pay my duties and taxes financial release. And they sent him a DocuSign, the whole thing, just for a pair of shoes coming from Sweden. So, and that's from FedEx. So the carriers are taking it very seriously. And this kind of goes back to that earlier question we had about enforcement and misdeclaring country of origin or misdeclaring value. You got to be really careful because they are watching for sure. And they know what the loopholes are, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to enterprises, big enterprises, we all know, Shein and Temu. Last week, if you logged on about Tuesday time, you would have seen the increase, the import charge increase. We've got a screenshot here, which clearly demonstrates that. So this has got, I can only imagine Shein and Temu and organizations like that shaking with anger because their edge, their whole business model was to provide consumers with low-cost alternatives. And all of a sudden, that's just evaporated overnight in the elimination of this de minimis rule. Because remember, the vast majority of their products comes from China. And in fact, Temu has suspended any shipping from China origin goods into the US. What are they doing? They're not going, they're not going extinct, but they are focusing on US merchants only and promoting US merchants where the goods have been assembled, put together in the US and selling that on their platform. So, I suppose if that was the intended purpose of the elimination of the de minimis and people then buy locally, then you could argue that it's happening with Temu. Yet to see how Shein responds. For now, though, you're paying that import charge, which you can see highlighted in the example screenshot.
Yeah, and we saw that Amazon took a crack at it, but quickly pulled back their horns in putting the tariffs out there, didn't they?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So further impacts then, the cancellation rate of containers. We touched on that. We've got more updated figures here, 50%. And you can see the projection here. This the asterisks, this is all by weeks across the bottom, 2025, 2024 compared. And you can see the estimation in the Port of LA and those weekly volumes expected to decline. This estimation, and this is the source of this, is the Port of Los Angeles, is down to zero. It's a hub, it's a receiving hub for made in China products. And they see it going all the way down. I mean, you can see the line there yourself. So a very sharp decline of imports. And if you think about where we are in the year, it affects a lot. Top of the list, I would say, is you have to be placing orders for manufacture for shipping of Christmas, holiday season. So those need to be in the supply chain starts now, okay, no later, because it needs to be manufactured, it needs to be transported, it needs to get to cleared, get to a warehouse, and then get ready for distribution end of September, October time, as we know. So it's going to have a huge impact for the rest of the year, without a doubt.
Yeah, it takes some time for these things to ripple through the supply chain. So, I mean, we talked about Amazon a little bit. A lot of third-party sellers have said they're scaling back or skipping Prime Day entirely, I presume, because they can't get the goods or because it's going to cost too much. But that's going to have a bit of an impact on Amazon and on the Prime Day, which is one of their big deals, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's just not going to work out. They're going to sit it out. It's just not going to work out for many merchants who Prime Day is their Super Bowl, right? It's their big event of the year. They fill their warehouses with products ready to be sold and then subsequently delivered here in the US. They're just going to sit that one out and see what happens.
Yeah, and so, I mean, how are you going to keep up with these changes? Really, you have to make sure. We've talked a lot about things that can happen. You can get your shipments held up in customs if you're not declaring properly. You can get penalties and fines for non-compliance. So those are things that can happen from a compliance standpoint and from a regulatory standpoint. But you also have to be careful because you can either undercharge or overcharge duties and therefore import taxes as well, which is going to affect your customers or you. So if you're overcharging, your customers are going to have a bad experience. If you're undercharging and you get the bills that are being charged correctly, you could have a pretty big headache when it comes to looking at the P&L. So it's important to make sure that you're up to date with these changes. And I know it's been a big challenge, but obviously that's why there's companies like ours around, because we try to help you do that. So some of the things that we've been talking to customers about, some of the things that they're doing to try to create some semblance of normalcy in this world is looking at diversification of carriers or sources of supply, if that's an option for you. A lot of folks don't have that option, but some do, so are exploring those different sources. Automating global trade compliance is kind of related. So, tools like ours, you can look at, hey, where are the best duty rates for my products? What are the restrictions that might apply to my products? What are the HS codes that I need? That kind of thing. Customs brokers, I was at the NCB FAA, which is the National Customs Broker Conference, annual conference in Phoenix, and those folks are just overwhelmed. They're answering all kinds of questions from their customers. Everyone's confused. Even they're confused in a lot of cases because the rules sometimes conflict and you get different information at different times. But if you can, try to work with your customs broker. Ensure that your product details are compliant. We mentioned that. We'll keep harping on it. Country of origin, HS code, and your declared value, very important. And lastly, what we've seen is especially with larger multinationals have been building inventory to try to absorb this and ride it out. They don't want to raise prices to their customers until they have to. So they're hoping that, this all settles down before they run out of inventory. So if that's an option, then you can always do something like that. So we're curious what you're thinking of doing. Are you thinking of diversifying, switching local suppliers, investing in new trade technologies, rethinking how you do things from a logistics standpoint, or you just don't know yet? If you could let us know, it's really informative. We're tracking this weekly to see what the trends are, and it's interesting that, I guess not surprising, a lot of folks don't know, but we are seeing some indication of movement in different areas.
Yeah. Whilst we're waiting for people to fill that in, just wanted to address a question that's come up a couple of times, Craig. I see one from Amanda and Jeff, around about the same sort of thing. The postal clearances from China into the US, what's going to be used? Is it the flat fee or is it the percentage of the value? So our understanding is that it's going to be whichever is greater. So your minimum is the flat fee. And then if the product is valued so high that it attracts the 120% becomes greater than the $100, then that's what you'll end up being charged. So that's our understanding, greater, whichever is greater.
Yep. Well, this is interesting. I don't know is usually the highest one. Actually, last week, I think it was close to 60%. Now we're seeing a little bit more about switching to local suppliers, diversifying. So that's interesting, rethinking distribution strategies. And you can see here, I don't know yet, has always been, I don't know if we got the ones from last week in there. Yeah, it's always been around 50%. But interesting that I think, these bars are going to continue to move around a little bit, especially as we start hearing trade deals announced, because, I'm guessing that a lot of folks are waiting until they understand what, maybe you're getting stuff from Vietnam, maybe you're getting stuff from Cambodia, maybe it's China. You want to see where that all levels out, right, before you make any big decisions. All right, one more question for you. what are your plans for addressing the increased tariffs? So are you going to pass the cost on to your customers? Are you going to show a tariff surcharge? Are you going to try to absorb it? Is there another strategy you have? This is also very interesting to try to understand what's happening. You know, and it's really kind of speaks to what's going to happen economically, right, Patrick?
Yeah, absolutely. We hear, I've heard customers give, you know, each of these answers. Okay, so very, very different strategies on how they're approaching it. What I can tell you is they're leaning towards passing on the costs, just like the Shein Temu screenshot we had before, passing on the cost by raising the prices. You've got to have pretty fat margins to be able to absorb these, especially the staggering amount of tariff which has been applied to China and Hong Kong. So, yep,
that's right. That's like
this is the direction. Yeah,
87%. That's pretty significant. Yeah, that are passing on or including a surcharge. So that would tell you that inflation's going up. Okay, so how can they take action with Avalara, Patrick? I think we, you know, shameless plug, we've got some tools that I think can help you.
Sure, absolutely. So it all starts, remember, the Rosetta Stone. It all starts with tariff code classification, or HS classification, knowing the HS codes of your products. Why? Because then that determines exactly how much duty you'll pay. You get your HS code right, you will not pay a penny more or a penny less duty than you should on those particular products. So always better to be compliant. In order to do so, classification. And then, of course, if you need calculations, then we can help you with calculations. Our content team, at 1 minute past midnight, on all the days of all the countries, of all the products that have been impacted by these changes, our content's up to date. So you know that at 1 minute past midnight, when you run a calculation through our software, you're going to get the correct duty amount, which will be payable to the US government. Last week we shared a demo, well, and the week before, and it was about our self-serve classification tool, where you can actually in your own time, you can determine the HS codes of your products. We can also do it for you. But if you wanted more information on that, we have a link to the demo that will come out in the email after this webinar. You can watch the demo yourself. But if you're wanting more information on how you can get your products classified, then the answer to this poll question is yes. Going to leave it up there for a while we do some Q&A. If you want, and we get back to people within 36 hours. So we've got a team of people who are waiting to respond to those who click yes, and you can ask them any questions you want. You can explore some of the products that we've got, and they're very helpful. Perhaps some Q&A whilst we leave this slide up for a little while.
Actually, just to point out, in case it wasn't clear, we have basically 4 different varieties of HS code classification. We have different varieties of calculation tools. We have restriction screening tools. We have content stores and libraries. So there's a lot of different tools. The demo that we've showed and that we show the screenshots of is just, it's good for showing on this kind of a format, but there's all kinds of different systems. We're also connected into a great many ERPs, commerce systems, et cetera, so we can make the integration a little easier for you. So why don't we jump into some questions?
Sure. So one from Jeff here. Jeff's a good contributor to questions, I've noticed. So where can I find import tariffs and duties? Is there an easy place? Duties and tariffs by HS code, imports into Canada with COO of Vietnam or China. So Jeff, those answers are in the self-serve. The screenshot I showed just before, there's a demo of it coming out in the email that you'll receive, and you'll be able to watch it. It takes about a minute to watch, and you can quickly search up. If you've got the HS code, you can quickly search up where's it coming from, country of origin, where's it going to, and it will present to you the duty rates applicable to US, Canada, any other of the 215 countries around the world. So your answers are all in self-serve, and our sales team can hook you up with that, no problem. You could, of course, read through executive orders. It'll take you a very long time. All the details are in the executive orders, but we've consumed all that and just turned it into easy self-serve software.
And we have some, actually, the other point is we have some great blogs that in the follow-up, there's links. So you'll see it on the last page. We should maybe move forward here and you can see it. Well, we know we're doing Q&A right now. Oh, we have another poll question. I'd forgotten about this. So we'll answer questions while they're answering this poll question. How about that? So, we want to make these sessions as useful to you as we can. So let us know. I'll let you, we won't go through them here because we're running out of time, but let you read those and decide what you think would be helpful for you going forward so we can continue to tune and tweak these webinars to best suit what you need. But yeah, there's another question here I saw from Barbara, Patrick. So regarding declared value. So is this the product value, ideally in USD, excluding shipping costs? Is that correct?
So it's the sale value. Okay, so you can't say, oh, it only cost me $5 to make, but I'm selling it for $5,000, so I'm only going to declare $5. So it's the sale value, the commercial value of the product. And yes, duties and taxes are applied to that sale value, plus shipping, plus any shipping insurance. So you've got to stack those three. It's a cocktail. You've got to stack those three ingredients up, and then your duties applied onto that amount.
Yeah, and those are called Incoterms, right? So that's what's called CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. There's also Incoterm called FOB, which means free on board, or it would just be the cost of the good. It depends on the country. So each country has its own version of how they calculate. Typically, it's CIF, right?
Yeah. Patrick asked, do I need country of origin and the HS code, or just the HS code? So you need country of origin. Why is that important? It's very important right now, so they know whether it's coming from China or Hong Kong. I haven't heard on any cases yet on where if there's no country of origin, they're going to assume China and Hong Kong, but you can expect that action at some point. And then more importantly, when the pause is up, remember all those different countries, the worst offenders on that Liberation Day slide? Country of origin, is it coming from Europe? Is it coming from South Africa? Is it coming from the UK? Is it coming from Japan? They're all going to have different duties. So know your countries of origin and know your HS code, Patrick.
Yeah. Just kind of scanning through. Here's one from Don, Patrick, and I'll try to answer it. I don't know if I 100% get the gist, but so it's is China shipment being charged? I think it's being charged the IEEPA reciprocal 10% tariff. So I guess that would mean coming into. I think that's what that means. And so the answer to that is, if it's coming into the US, then there's a base tariff for the goods. So let's say, before all this took place, maybe the base tariff for the good was, 20%. Let's say it's 20% for the good. Let's say it's over $800 too, because then duties apply, right? If it was under $800 in previous times, then duties wouldn't have applied. But like in previous years or previous administrations, it would have been 20% for the good, over $800. Now it's going to be the 20% plus the 145%. So the effective rate would be 165%, starting at $0, right?
Right.
So that's the big change. It's the combination of the de minimis plus the punitive tariffs plus the original underlying tariff for the good.
Correct. Leslie asked if sometimes a part comes in with a HS code, they want to send it back. That happens, but the HS code is not available to that returning country. Is it a country by country thing? You're absolutely right, Leslie. It is a country by country thing. Every country has its own HS codes. The first 6 digits are universal, always the same, and they broadly describe the product: footwear, fruit, shirt, that sort of thing. But then you need to get more granular. So you need to add those additional digits. Here in the US, it is 10. In Bolivia, it's 12. In Japan, it's 9. And the codes are different. So you need to know the code of that destination country for that part you're sending back. So yes, it's a country by country thing, and it's something we can help you with.
Yeah. Well, we got to as many questions as we could. There's so many and great questions. So we will follow up after the webinar. You will get a copy of the presentation. All of the links you see on your screen, those are all hot links. So we've got a lot of great blogs. Our in-house blog writer, Gail Cole, she reads all of the executive orders, works with our content team to make sure that all of our information is accurate. We've got our tariff code classification demos Patrick mentioned, and a lot of other resources that you can get. And obviously, you know, if you do want to talk to somebody about how we can help you out, you know, there will be contact resources within the communication as well. So with that, I will thank you for your time. It's sure been an interesting ride. We'll see what happens between now and next week, but thank you again for your time, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you both. Be sure to check out our upcoming webinars at avalara.com/webinars. In addition to that, we have Avalara's Customer Conference Crush going on tour this year. So check that out at events.avalara.com for details. Thank you all for joining us today. You'll receive a post-event email later today with the link back to this console where you can access the recording, slide deck, and additional resources. We hope you can join us again next week as we continue our weekly webinar series. That post-event email will have instructions on how to register for upcoming sessions. Thanks again. Have a great day.